श्री स्वामीनारायण भगवान निजे अक्षर पुरुषोत्तम महाराज निजे प्रमुख स्वामी महाराज निजे महंत स्वामी महाराज निजे प्रमुख स्वामी महाराज शताब्दी महोत्सव निजे. Today we will continue with the Jivan Charitra Abhyas. We are looking at part 1, pages 203 to 253, and the last time we left off at page 213, where Puja Pramukh Swami Maharaj was in Sarangpur and they were celebrating the Jaljini festival, and we know that Pramukh Swami Maharaj washed all the bathrooms and the toilets and did that kind of a seva. As we move on to E15, so Pramukh Swami Maharaj was in Sarangpur, and while he was in Sarangpur, the life biography of Bhagaji Maharaj had been written by Harshad Kaka. We can see Harshad Bhai Dave in the photograph over there. And he had brought a copy to Sarangpur on the 30th of September 1955 for Pramukh Swami Maharaj. At that time, Swamishri took time out to read the book, and he read all 600 pages in about 3.5 days' time. Pramukh Swami Maharaj was very, he loved to read. Many of us know that Pramukh Swami had a very strong passion for reading Shastras. And as soon as he got Bhagaji Maharaj's Jivan Charitra, in 3.5 days, Pramukh Swami Maharaj finished reading this Jivan Charitra. Even today, many Haribhaktas take a lot of interest in reading Pramukh Swami Maharaj's Jivan Charitra. As soon as the Jivan Charitra comes out, people spend all the time just trying to finish and read and enjoy the book. And this is one thing that we know that Pramukh Swami Maharaj enjoyed a lot. As we move on to E16, Pramukh Swami Maharaj traveled from Sarangpur and he went to Gadda. Now, before he went to Ahmedabad, and then eventually went to Ahmedabad. As a matter of fact, because Swamishri was very young and he has taken all these responsibilities, a lot of things were his reputation was growing very, very fast, because he ended up, most of the time, Pramukh Swami Maharaj was the main speaker in all the parayans. Any decisions that needed to be taken by the committee, it was again under Swamishri's leadership. Swamishri's words were considered the final in all the planning events, all the festivals and everything like that. And Yogiji Maharaj would always praise Pramukh Swami Maharaj and talk about Pramukh Swami Maharaj. Now, as a result of all this, there were some people that weren't too happy with Pramukh Swami Maharaj's reputation growing so fast. And fueled with a little bit of jealousy, they decided to plot a plan to poison Pramukh Swami Maharaj. Now, this was a very serious thing that was going to take place. Luckily, the plot was unsuccessful and it was uncovered, and the perpetrators were unmasked. Eventually, it was brought to the attention of the trustees and the senior karyakas. And so what they did was they decided to bring the perpetrators to Ahmedabad, and they wanted to punish them. Everybody, all the people that were there, the perpetrators were obviously very scared and terrified about the punishment. As soon as Pramukh Swami Maharaj found out, 2 senior Haribhaktas and a sadhu who was instrumental in uncovering the plot, he actually found out. And so they all went and told Pramukh Swami Maharaj. And as soon as Pramukh Swami Maharaj found out, he listened to the whole story, and immediately he placed water in the hands of all 3 of them and told them to take an oath never to repeat this ever again, not to let anybody find out about this, and to keep it a complete secret. This shows a very nice expression of Pramukh Swami Maharaj and how magnanimous his heart was, that he was able to forgive people like this and not take it any further. Very, very forgiving. In fact, it didn't just end there. As soon as the perpetrators were brought in front of Pramukh Swami Maharaj assured them not to worry. He told them that don't worry about this will all be forgotten over time. Remember, he had told the other people to bury it, not to bring this out ever again. He told the perpetrators not to worry about it will all be forgotten. And then he told them not to worry, and he said, look, just stay here. I will make sure we look after you. And Swamishri made sure that he looked after those individuals till their final days. Nobody would have found out until only 36 years later, the incident resurfaced None of the perpetrators were alive. They had passed on. But one individual who had witnessed this whole incident mentioned it in passing. That's when everybody found out. And Pramukh Swami Maharaj wasn't too happy with this. And he kept on saying that, look, nothing like this has ever happened. He just denied it, that it ever happened. And then he said, why do you remember these kind of things? You should forget about all these things. Think about all the seva that these Hari Bhaktas or these people had actually done back in the day. I don't want anybody to ever write anything about this or bring this up again. And so we can notice that Pramukh Swami Maharaj was very, very forgiving. He tolerated all this, but never ever brought up these situations ever again. Let's move on to E17, which is page 215. Yogi Maharaj had traveled to Africa in 1955, and on his return, he was going to arrive in Mumbai. So Yogi Maharaj came to Mumbai, and from Mumbai, he was going to go to Atladra. Pramukh Swami Maharaj made sure that he went to Atladra to inspect the site, to make sure that everything was suitable for Yogi Bapa's needs, the welcome assembly, everything was supposed to be prepared, and so that Yogi Maharaj experienced no difficulties. Yogi Maharaj landed in Mumbai on the 23rd of October 1955, and on the morning of 25th October 1955, Yogi Maharaj then came to Atladra. A huge procession had been arranged to welcome Yogi Maharaj. Almost 1,000 people had gathered in the Nagar Yatra. An elephant had been decorated with Yogi Maharaj was supposed to sit on that, Mota Swami, and even Pramukh Swami Maharaj was requested to sit on that as well. There was a band, a darbar band that had been arranged to play at that time to welcome Yogi Maharaj. So thousands of devotees from all over were there to welcome Yogi Maharaj. And the procession then carried on all the way to Gnan Mandir. And wherever Yogi Maharaj went from there on, grand welcome assemblies were arranged. All the way Ahmedabad, in Bhavnagar, in Rajkot, in Gadda, in Bochasan. And Pramukh Swami Maharaj was present in all these venues, looking after all the arrangements, the assemblies, everything that was there. Because after all, his guru had come back from an international tour. It was only fitting to welcome him in such a grand in such a grand festive way. Now, during the Vichran, one day, Yogi Maharaj, Mota Swami, and Pramukh Swami Maharaj, and some of the Santos, they were traveling by train from Botad. It was late one evening, and Pramukh Swami Maharaj was very much well aware of Yogi Maharaj's tendency to feel cold. Very easily he would feel cold, and he would prefer to have, the environment wanted to be a little bit warmer. And to make sure that Yogi Bapa was comfortable in the train, he stood up and shut all the windows in the compartment. They were sitting in the same compartment, and he made sure he shut all the windows because Yogi Bapa couldn't stand the cold. Immediately, Mota Swami, who was sitting over there, Mota Swami started feeling much warmer. And so he quickly stood up and he asked, who closed the windows? And directly he pointed to Pramukh Swami Maharaj. He goes, it must have been you who closed these windows. Can you please open them? And Pramukh Swami Maharaj very humbly requested to Mota Swami that, Swami, Yogi Bapa will feel cold if we open the windows. It's probably best that we change the compartments and move from one compartment to another. Mota Swami eventually moved to the next compartment. But we notice one thing, that Pramukh Swami Maharaj was always a sevak of Yogi Bapa. Every little thing, he was always concerned about Yogi Bapa's comfort and wanted to make sure that everything was just right for Yogi Bapa. And we can see Pramukh Swami Maharaj's Guru Bhakti towards Yogi Bapa in this little prasang over here. Now, throughout this Jivan Charitra study that we're looking at, we notice that there are a lot of details that are the dates, the places, all these little details we can see. And sometimes we wonder, where did we get all this from? Now, Pramukh Swami Maharaj has stayed with Yogi Bapa in all these events. But when we look through the Pramukh Swami Maharaj's diary that he had written in those days, it's very interesting to see that his tendency to note down the smallest details of Yogi Bapa's lila, it's of huge accuracy at a very high level of historical insight, and lots of minute details can be seen in this. And despite his hectic schedule, if you can imagine, he was so busy. Swami was traveling from one village to another, managing all the mulakat schedules, the Nagar Yatras, the receptions, the sabhas, all these things. Yet, Pramukh Swami Maharaj found time to take note of Yogi Maharaj's travels. And he detailed everything. And this is again another example of Pramukh Swami Maharaj's Guru Bhakti. We'll take a little insight into some of the diary notes. On the 25th of October 1955, Yogi Maharaj arrived in Atladra. And in reference to this, Swamishri had noted down the name of the train in which Yogi Maharaj had arrived. Also, he noted the time at which he had arrived. He also noted down who sat on top of the two elephants during the Nagar Yatra and who was fanning Yogi Maharaj. Small details like this. Swami also goes on to mention in his diary the names of the dignitaries that had attended the reception. And a number of those devotees at the reception, the number of people staying back to eat, all these things were noted in the diary. This diary currently is still available. It is present in Sarangpur, Pramukh Swami Maharaj's handwritten diary. It has also been typed up, and many of these accounts that we look at today are based off that diary. Again, Swami writes, on the 29th of October 1955, as part of the Sabha program that took place in Gondal, a drama was performed. In relation to this, again, Swamishri noted down the details of the title of the drama and its content. And this was the first time that such a presentation had been performed in the Sanstha, a drama like this. So again, something that Swami took a note of again. Again, during these celebrations in Gondal, he noted down again the Seva department of all the youth volunteers, the head of the departments, how the departments were functioning. All these little things were written again in Pramukh Swami Maharaj's diary. He also noted down the names of the devotees whose houses that Yogi Maharaj had stayed during the stay. Not only that, even the addresses of the Hari Bhaktas. So again, very detailed account in Pramukh Swami Maharaj's diary. On the 6th of November 1955, Yogi Maharaj went to the bungalow of Maharaja Shri Krishna Kumarsi, who was of Bhavnagar. Pramukh Swami Maharaj noted down the details of Yogi Maharaj's visit, including the length of the meeting, who accompanied them, the ambience, and what was discussed. He even made a note that 2 photographs were taken, one of Yogi Maharaj alone and one of Yogi Maharaj with the other sadhus and the devotees. Now we can see very detailed was this record. He also would take a note of the donations that were offered to Thakurji and would make a note of which mandirs these donations needed to be sent to. You can see a president truly in action, where to distribute the funds, how to supply the money wherever it's needed, and how to distribute all that. The foresight is very interesting in the precision of the details of the historical occasions that Pramukh Swami Maharaj noted in his diary. But what's even more interesting is that on the day of Pramukh Varni Din, the day he was made president, there was very little detail about it. Anything that was related to him, he hardly wrote anything about it, which is again something very interesting to note down. Let's move on to E19, page 218. A very interesting story over here. The government had provided land to the Sanstha in the Kheda district. Almost 27 villages in the Matar region and 7 villages of Memdawad region. So a total of 34 villages where the Sanstha had been offered from the government. Shastriji Maharaj had given this land to different Hari Bhaktas to look after. Pramukh Swami Maharaj would often visit these places for administrative work related to the land, etc. And often with him, Rasik Bhai secretary, who would also be there with Pramukh Swami Maharaj to meet the farmers. Now, on one occasion, 2 farmers had a fallout with each other, and the rift had developed to such an extent that they couldn't stand each other. Now, Pramukh Swami Maharaj once was traveling or was on a farm with one of the farmers. His name was Bhika Pocha. And Swami went to his land and they were discussing something. And suddenly, while they were walking, they saw Ambalal Bhai, the farmer whom Bhika Bhai had a fallout with, who was coming from the other side. Ambalal Bhai and his 3 brothers. Now, these 4 brothers and Bhika Pocha, these were the 2 parties that were against each other. The 4 brothers were very well built, and as soon as they saw Bhika Bhai, they angrily shouted, "Bhikli, what do you think you're doing over here?" Rasik Bhai's secretary immediately knew that the tone of the language, that something serious is going to take place. And so immediately he told Bhika Bhai, "Why don't you move out of here? Let's move away. We don't want anything unbecoming over here. And we don't want any violence to happen over here." As soon as Rasik Bhai said this, Bhika Bhai got even more upset. He was even more fueled. So he said, "What are they going to do to me?" And it became into a proper argument. And there was a face-off. And without anything, Pramukh Swami Maharaj also told him, "Look, I want you to walk away from this. Let's not get involved in this thing." But obviously, when 2 parties were so angry with each other, it was very difficult to stop them. And the 4 brothers, they charged towards Bhika Bhai. Pramukh Swami Maharaj mentions in one of the pravachans as well, and he says that he stood in he got in the middle of the attack, trying to stop them, and he put both his hands out. So in an attempt to try and protect Bhikhabai. But it so happened that the four brothers came racing so fast, and they bumped into Pramukh Swami Maharaj. Pramukh Swami Maharaj fell over, rolled over 3 times onto the ground. He had a lot of dirt all over him. And Pramukh Swami Maharaj says, I just managed to get up at that time. But when they saw that Pramukh Swami Maharaj fell over, it calmed the whole situation. These people were there to probably kill this guy. But Pramukh Swami Maharaj was there, and luckily he protected everybody. The 4 brothers came back very ashamed with what they did. They got up and they asked Pramukh Swami Maharaj for forgiveness. Pramukh Swami Maharaj obviously was very forgiving. He was just happy that the situation was diffused. But this is another incident that we notice in the Jivan Charitra over here. Let's move on to E20. In 1956, it was decided to celebrate the birth anniversary of Yogi Maharaj on Vaishak Vad Baras, 6th of June 1956. Now, this was the first time that Yogi Maharaj's birthday was officially going to be celebrated on this date. Until that, it wasn't decided. They didn't have much clarity about which date Yogi Maharaj's birthday was. But after a little bit of history and a little bit of research, the date was finally decided, and eventually it was decided to celebrate Yogi Baba's birthday for the first time in Sarampur. Pramukh Swami Maharaj wanted to make sure that this was celebrated in the best way possible, and he left no stone unturned. He made sure that the festival was celebrated in the grandest way. Under his guidance and plans, they expected about 70 to 80,000 people back then. And Pramukh Swami Maharaj was taking care of all the responsibilities, from accommodation, the sabha mandap, the food arrangements, the yagna, the transportation, everything. Pramukh Swami Maharaj was obviously in charge of all that. But he made sure that everything was planned to the T. The meetings that they would hold every day, they would go until probably 1 a.m. at that time. But all the departments and everything. But Pramukh Swami Maharaj wanted to make sure that everything was done very smoothly at that time. And amidst all these seva responsibilities, Pramukh Swami Maharaj made sure that he was there as part of all the sabha as well. In all the festival assemblies, he was always present as well. And this was something that was very, very noteworthy as well. So all the Hari Bhaktas were all very, very happy with the way the whole utsav, the whole celebrations were done. And seeing Pramukh Swami Maharaj's planning skills and his desire to serve, the modesty, his personality, all the guests, they all said in one thing to Yogi Maharaj, that yes, Yogi Maharaj is the guru, is such a senior guru, but we were also very, very impressed. We can never forget the way this young Pramukh Swami Maharaj took a place in everybody's hearts. So that's a very nice incident in this chapter as well. Pramukh Swami Maharaj carried on his travels. In 1956, with Yogi Maharaj, they went to Bhuj. And as a part of their vicharan in the Panchtirthi, they ended up in Bhuj. Unfortunately, just a short while earlier, Bhuj had been hit with an earthquake. And so, they went and visited every place, and they prayed for the peace and the stability of that area as well at that time. So that's something that's also mentioned in this chapter as well. Now we'll move on to E21, which is on page 221. As the responsibilities increased for both Yogi Maharaj and Swamishri, it happened that they would have to split the travels as well. So Yogi Baba would have to go someplace, and Pramukh Swami Maharaj would have to go to another place as well. But on important occasions, Yogi Maharaj made sure that Pramukh Swami Maharaj joined him in everywhere else as well. And he was full of confidence about Pramukh Swami Maharaj's capabilities. Swamishri had understood that Yogi Maharaj's mind to such an extent that Swamishri often said, Pramukh Swami Maharaj would often say, कि मारो ने योगी जी महाराज नो विचार क्या रही जुदा पड़िया ज नथी. My wish has never been different to Yogi Ji Maharaj's wish. And he served Yogi Ji Maharaj like a true sevak, almost to the point where he became antaryami. He knew exactly what Yogi Ji Maharaj wanted to wish. And same thing with Yogi Ji Maharaj. Yogi Baba was also very pleased. Wherever he went, he would talk about Pramukh Swami Maharaj's mahima. On one occasion, when Swamishri was to go to Gondal, Yogi Ji Maharaj informed all the sadhus over there by a letter. He wrote in a letter saying, Pramukh Swami Maharaj is coming to Gondal to stay. Go to the train station to receive him. Offer prostrations to him. Ensure that he is served different food daily. Make Puran Puri for sure. After Katha and Cheshta, take the opportunity to sit with him. When he leaves Gondal, ensure that you accompany him to the station and only return to the mandir once the train has left. We can see that Yogi Ji Maharaj is explaining the mahima and the greatness of Pramukh Swami Maharaj. Remember everything that he has said to you. Sit together and do goshti amongst yourselves. In this way, you will experience bliss of Shastriji Maharaj. Again, we see how Yogiji Maharaj spoke the glory and the mahima of Pramukh Swami Maharaj over here. Let's move on to E22. So we heard about the first special train yatra that had been organized in 1953. Many people were not able to participate in this, and they felt that it was a missed out opportunity. And so a second special train yatra had been organized 3 years later in 1956. In no time at all, 650 people registered for the second train yatra. And it was to be arranged in the presence of Yogi Bapa and Pramukh Swami Maharaj. But this time, Yogiji Maharaj also made sure he took Vinu Bhai with him on the yatra, Vinu Bhai being Puja Mahant Swami Maharaj. In terms of numbers and places to visit, this yatra was much larger than the 1953 yatra because the pilgrimage places also included South India, places in South India this time. And it was going to last for almost 45 days. The yatra began in Vadodara on the 7th of December 1956 on Magshar Sud Pancham, 5th at 3 p.m. Incidentally, 7th of December was Pramukh Swami Maharaj's birthday, but there's no mention of this because there was no celebration at that time. The group eventually traveled to Ujjain, Agra, Mathura, Gokul, Vrindavan, Delhi and Haridwar, ultimately getting to Rishikesh. And here Swamishri then visited Shivanand Ashram on the banks of the river Ganga. The head of the ashram, Shivanandji, he also came to meet Pramukh Swami Maharaj, and Swami spoke to him a lot about Sriji Maharaj and Yogi Bapa. Any opportunity that Pramukh Swami Maharaj had to speak about the greatness of his gurus, Yogiji Maharaj and Shastriji Maharaj, and his Ishtadev Bhagwan Swaminarayan, he would make sure he did that. Eventually, the group then traveled to Ayodhya, Chapaya, Allahabad, Banaras, Gaya, etc. And the yatra then headed to Calcutta and then eventually to Jagannath Puri. The train then traveled towards Madras. Eventually, when they got to Madras, a very noteworthy incident took place in Madras at this time. One morning, when Yogi Bapa had finished his datan, Vinu Bhai was also in seva at that time with Yogiji Maharaj. But one individual came to Yogiji Maharaj and started to vent his frustration about Pramukh Swami Maharaj. And he had so many things to say. He was talking a lot of negative things. In fact, he was very, very hostile in the way he said things as well. Yogiji Maharaj tried to stop him and explain to him what the truth was, but he was just not willing to listen. And paying very little attention to Yogiji Maharaj's word, the man carried on and he said something very strong. He said, Yogi Bapa, if you go back, I will make sure I put Pramukh Swami Maharaj in jail right now. This is the extent that he had gone up to. Yogiji Maharaj was very shocked and became very saddened to hear this. He walked away from that place. But as he was leaving, he mentioned to that man, he said, Pramukh Swami Maharaj has been appointed as a senior by Shastriji Maharaj. Why are you doing this? And despite having the authority to remove the person from the sanstha, Pramukh Swami Maharaj knew about all this malicious nature of this person. He did not exercise the authority. Mahant Swami Maharaj would often write that Pramukh Swami Maharaj power no powder kari nakhyo che. On the contrary, he actually forgave him. Then the yatra continued from Madras and they visited many other places of pilgrimage in South India. During the final leg of the yatra, the pilgrims, they visited Solapur, and eventually from Mumbai, they went to Vartal, Dakor, and then finally Vadodara. That's how the whole 45-day yatra ended. We'll move on to E24 now. One of the most revolutionary things that Yogiji Maharaj did was the fact that he inspired very young, educated people to become sadhus. And with the changing times, Yogiji Maharaj had recognized this need. And he was way, way advanced of his times. His foresight was incredible. And during these times, he noticed that a lot of youth were also traveling with Yogiji Maharaj. And it was his vision that they take Diksha. And on the auspicious day of the 2nd of February 1957, Mahasud Bij, Samvat 2013, this was the day of the revolution. Why? Because this was the day when Yogiji Maharaj gave Tyagashram Diksha to Puja Mahant Swami Maharaj. So Vinu Bhai was the first yuvak to join this. And Yogiji Maharaj gave him Diksha and he initiated him and named him Vinu Bhagat. And this all took place in Gondal in the Akshar Deri. So Yogiji Maharaj then applied the Swastik Tilak on Vinu Bhagat's head and gave him the Guru Mantra and initiated him and named him Vinu Bhagat. Swamishri was also present, Pramukh Swami Maharaj was also present during this historic occasion. Because this was the first incident that took place like this. Little did anybody realize that afterwards Pramukh Swami Maharaj would be there to fulfill the desire of Yogi Maharaj to initiate another 700 sadhus. And today we know that there's over 1,000 sadhus in the sanstha that were initiated by Pramukh Swami Maharaj. Let's move on to E25. So eventually, while they were traveling, once they reached a village called Vagoria. And in the evening assembly, Yogi Maharaj instructed a young yuvak by the name of Niranjan Bhai, who was a Brahmin from Mumbai. And Yogi Maharaj instructed him to go and prepare some khichdi, shak, and warm some milk as well, make some ukado. So Niranjan Bhai went to the kitchen to prepare all this because the idea was to offer this to Thakurji. So he went in there, but Yogi Maharaj also sent Chuni Bhagat to go and help Niranjan Bhai. Niranjan was about to prepare the vagar for the shak. And immediately, unexpectedly, Mota Swami walks in. And Mota Swami told him, look, don't do the vagar, I'll do it. So Niranjan Bhai walked away and he said, Swami, very well, you carry on doing it. Mota Swami, while he was performing the vagar, he added excess chili powder. And as a result of that, Niranjan Swami immediately pointed to Mota Swami that we need to take some out for Yogi Maharaj because Yogi Bappa won't be able to take something so spicy. And Mota Swami, in his very normal way, said, look, this is not spicy at all. It should be okay. And he went ahead and did the vagar. After the thad was done, everybody sat down to eat. Yogi Maharaj took some shak and he found it extremely spicy. But very typical of Yogi Bappa, he didn't let anybody know. And immediately, he said to Mota Swami, because Mota Swami asked, because everybody noticed that Yogi Bappa was drinking water. And so everybody immediately recognized this, that Yogi Bappa has found it very, very spicy. And so Mota Swami then asked Yogi Bappa, okay, Swami, how is the shak? And before anybody could answer, Yogi Maharaj immediately replied, excellent, it is superb. And then he drank a little bit of water again and said again, this shak is really, really well made. Everybody noticed, but Yogi Bappa again didn't want to let Mota Swami know about this. Pramukh Swami Maharaj had noticed this. And so the next day, when they went to Atladra, he called Niranjan Bhai and told Niranjan, please be very careful today when you make the shak. Make sure you take some aside for Yogi Maharaj before it is done again, before the same mistake happens again. Niranjan Bhai was very touched with this because he noticed that Pramukh Swami Maharaj was also aware of Yogi Bappa and what had actually happened on that day. And so this is another incident that we hear in this chapter. Let's move on to E26. Pramukh Swami Maharaj was once in Gondal, and Keshavbhai Patel, a Haribhakt from a village called Vadu, had come for darshan with a letter of recommendation from Pramukh Swami Maharaj. And the letter had been addressed to Yogi Maharaj. This letter was given by that devotee to Yogi Bappa. And as soon as he read that letter, Yogi Bappa personally took Keshavbhai to the dining area. He sat him down to eat. Yogi Maharaj made sure that he looked after him. Pramukh Swami Maharaj had written a letter to Yogi Bappa to make sure that somebody looked after this Keshavbhai Patel. But Yogi Bappa took it upon himself to make sure that he took care of every need for Keshavbhai. And while he was serving Keshavdas, Yogi Bappa said that Pramukh Swami Maharaj is the owner of this mandir. If he sends a letter asking us to look after you, then we must take great care of you. Now we can see the mahima that Yogi Maharaj also had for Pramukh Swami Maharaj at that time as well. He was very caring and loving towards Pramukh Swami Maharaj as well. Yogi Maharaj looked after Keshavdas very carefully during the entire day of Gondal. And on seeing Yogi Maharaj giving so much respect to Swamishri's simple recommendation, everybody realized the rajipo that Yogi Maharaj had for Pramukh Swami Maharaj. Let's look at E27. On July 19th, 1957, Pramukh Swami Maharaj had joined Yogi Maharaj for the Shravan month Parayan, which was going to take place in Mumbai in Kapolwadi. Pramukh Swami Maharaj conducted this Parayan on the Hari Lilamrit. And at the end of the Parayan, Yogi Maharaj said in his blessings, Pramukh Swami Maharaj has performed the discourse today. He is the actual form of Shastriji Maharaj. Shastriji Maharaj Nut Swarup che. We can see that Yogi Maharaj is really explaining the mahima of Pramukh Swami Maharaj to everybody at that time as well. After the Parayan in Mumbai, Swamishri left for Vichran in Gujarat, and Yogi Bappa decided to stay back in Mumbai for a few more days before going to Valsad, Bilimora, Surat, and then eventually in Bharuch. But from Bharuch, Yogi Maharaj then went to Atladra for the Janmashtami festivals. Now en route, Pramukh Swami Maharaj was in a village called Miyagam, station. There was a station over there, Miyagam station. Pramukh Swami Maharaj found out that Yogi Bapa was going to travel over there. So Pramukh Swami Maharaj dropped everything at that point. He ran to the station, made sure he was there. Even if it was just a 2-minute darshan, but he went to the station for Yogi Bapa's darshan. We can see that darshan ni je talawali Yogi Bapa માટે ની જે પ્રમુખ સાંઈ મહારાજની હતી ને, we can see that as well. He was very eager to have any darshan of Yogi Bapa. They're just separated, but again when they got to the airport, to the train station, out of respect, Pramukh Swami Maharaj made sure that he went and met Yogi Bapa as well. And when Yogi Bapa heard that Pramukh Swami Maharaj was coming for darshan, he got up from his seat in the carriage of the train and he did danvats. He started prostrating to Pramukh Swami Maharaj. Pramukh Swami Maharaj, before he could even enter the carriage, Pramukh Swami Maharaj also started doing danvats to Yogi Bapa. As soon as Pramukh Swami Maharaj saw that Yogi Bapa was doing danvats, immediately ran to stop Yogi Bapa from performing danvats. But everybody was witness to this. Yogi Bapa then said to Pramukh Swami Maharaj, "Ke tame bahut dakhlo karo છો. You are tolerating a lot of hardships." This is another incident we see the connection and the relationship that Yogi Bapa had for Pramukh Swami Maharaj. On the 21st of August 1957, they conducted the groundbreaking ceremony of the new Shikharbad Mandir in Ahmedabad. Eventually, then they went to Sarangpur for Jaljini Utsav. After celebrating the Jaljini Utsav in Sarangpur, Yogi Baba and Pramukh Swami Maharaj then traveled to a village called Turkha. Now, in Turkha, they were accorded a grand welcome ceremony in a buggy. Unfortunately, it was raining and there was a lot of thunder and lightning on that day. But despite all that, just to fulfill the wishes of these Hari Bhaktos, Yogi Ji Maharaj and Pramukh Swami Maharaj went through all these difficulties. We will end today's session. Shri Swaminarayan Bhagwanani Jai.